Welcome to the Climate and Coordination RCAST, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and RChain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, RChain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey.
Okay, good morning and welcome to this week's Climate and Coordination RCAST. We're very happy to be able to keep meeting with different guests, some who've been with us before and some who have not been with us before, to discuss everything that's going on in the world, hopefully give the community a bit of perspective, maybe some inspiration, and who knows what else. So I have one topic today I wanted to just discuss, a headline that has been sort of circulating that I think is quite important because it's basically the theme of one of the major themes that we've discussed on this call for a long, long time. And then we're going to have some discussions with some other members on this call. But the first thing I wanted to discuss, I've just put it in the chat, is from The Guardian. And this is basically just a reminder that we are very close to breaking the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold of heating and on Earth. And I know lots of people have different views on this. Some people think it's still possible long term to limit to 1.5 or less. Some people think that there's absolutely no way we can do this anymore, and we're going to go past 2 or probably 3 degrees. There's been a ton of news about the coral reefs having another bleaching event, so I think obviously it's now fair to say, as George Monbiot said, that we've sort of normalize the extinction of the coral reef, which is pretty bad. But this is an interesting little article. It sort of explains why this 1.5 degrees is coming up in the news now. So basically, we might touch on this level of heating in the next 5 years. There's like kind of a 50-50 chance we'll touch on it, but that doesn't mean that it will be permanently 1.5 degrees of warming. So basically, usually what happens with these limits is that first you touch it for a day or two, and then it stays underneath that level. And then, over time, you get more and more days where you're at that level that you can say, yes, we're at that level now. So we're not sure exactly how soon it will be that 1.5 degrees Celsius of heating is going to be reached on a stable basis. Like it's going to be continually at 1.5, but there's a 50% chance that we will at least reach 1.5 once in the next year, in the next 5 years, pardon me. So that means by the year 2027. So this is very dangerous. Obviously, 1.5 degrees might seem very arbitrary to some people, but there's a reason that this was chosen as a threshold for basically human life being able to, for sure, weather the storm, as it were. And now that we are teetering on this limit, I think it's even more important to draw attention to what the IPCC has said recently, which is that we need to reach peak emissions in the next 2 years by 2025. And obviously with the war that Putin has waged in Ukraine, there's now a sort of last ditch zombie-like push to get more oil out of the earth from farther off places. And even the United States has taken a role in this and trying to figure out where the new drilling is going to be. So I just wanted to announce that this is now a headline. And for anybody who doesn't know, I would say watch the coral reefs. That's going to be one of the major ecosystems that the news is going to revolve around, if I were to guess, in the next couple of years. And I guess I'll pause there to see if anybody has comments on this, but we have lots more to get to. So let me know what you guys think.
Well, I'd say this is something that, Greg has said over and over again, that, we're almost certain to pass that 1.5 degrees limit. It's all about mitigating the effects of what's going to happen. I'd like to hope that along with the quest for new sources of oil due to the conflict in Ukraine, there's also a quest for alternative sources of jet fuel, for example, and other things. I've been reading articles about some of that potential. So, yeah, I guess those are the comments I'd have to say.
I've been part of the environmental movement since the 60s. And, I'm thrilled to see, the explosion of activity in that area now. But all of the predictions that people have made so far have been wrong. So I don't know. I understand it's important to get these data points, but it's also, truth in science demands that we publish all the results, not just the ones that support our position.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to, intelligently attack the problem.
So do you have some sources, Jim, that contradict the idea that 1.5 degrees Celsius is an important number?
No, I haven't actually been doing a lot of research in the climate area because I feel like other people are doing that. But it's just that the planet has survived this far. It would be unthinkable, by people in the 60s. Okay. And
well, sure. I mean, lots of people think that nature is too big to fail, but it's not. I mean,
yeah. Well,
it's not.
It's going to change.
If I
It's
may,
going to change. And the one
thing.
thing that I hold out some hope in, that every time the world's gotten this hot, we've had an ice age, and what we've done may be forestalling the ice age a little bit. But and we'll see what happens. I mean, I am so glad that people are doing the environmental stuff they're doing. We're minimizing our footprint on the planet. And, I'm just a very skeptical scientist. And anytime someone says science is settled, they say they have no idea what science is.
Can I just interject one thing, which is it's not really about whether the planet survives. It's about whether we as a species survive. Very different thing, right? There's no doubt Gaia, Mother Earth, will survive us. The question is will we be around long enough? And will we be participating in our own demise? Or maybe, I mean, the alternative would be, if global warming wasn't real, is that we do become extinct, right? Highly likely. Every species, major species, has become extinct. And other, like the dinosaurs. However, they didn't actually have a great deal to say in that matter. That's just a consequence possibly of a big asteroid. But this whole climate crisis is about whether we survive, not whether nature survives, not whether the planet survives. The planet will survive with or without us.
Yeah, and I also think it's a question of how much damage we're willing to cause to the billions of years of evolution that has supported life on Earth. And, there's a big push to become a multiplanetary species. I have some friends who are working really hard on that in different companies, and several friends that are training to be astronauts or are training to go to space. Well, I guess that means they're going to be astronauts. I mean, some have ambitions to actually live on Mars. Some just want to go and come back. But, I think we have to really start understanding the value of our planet in the context of becoming a multiplanetary species. And, we want the Earth to be a beautiful place to come back to. And we want Earth to be a beautiful, abundant home base. And if we screw that up, it's not easy to find another place that can help us replenish or restore the things that we're destroying. So I just think it's also, to add on to what you said, Steve, it's also about really understanding on a spiritual level the value of where we are. Yeah,
and our role on this planet. Interestingly, to be an interstellar species, let alone an interplanetary species, but even to be an interplanetary species, you've got to have a lot more control of your environment on the planet that you hail from in order to conduct such journeys. And we're not even close to that, because we don't have the level of cooperation needed to be able to harness the energy that's inherent not just on this planet, but the energy of our own sun in any real meaningful way. And there's a whole genre of thought about how many other intelligent life forms there might be out there, which rest on the premise that to be an intelligent life form that could go to other places, you have to have harnessed the energy inherent in your solar system, not just your planet.
I guess I'm just, saying, well, 50 years we complained about it. Now, what do we have to do? We have to build a decentralized system that can beat the industrial, military industrial complex, and beat the banks, and beat the oil interests. We've known what to do. Basically, and we want to do it. It's just that the control of the systems isn't allowing it to happen. Like the electric car finally is here, and it may be because we have Musk, who knows? But we don't have mesh networking. We don't have. There's so many things we don't have because we can't cooperate in a decentralized manner and develop consensus across communities and do the things that are necessary for us to populate the galaxy and beyond. Because we can do it, okay? We know how.
Well, fantastic. So, Steve, I'd like to turn it over to you, and then we'll get back with Jim as a continuation of our discussion with him last week.
Okay, so so I'm bringing a little video clip to the table today. Before I explain more about the context as to why, just want to say one little announcement, which is that RPC's mainnet is live and kicking. And I've announced that on Discord just before this call. And I have even checked my own RPC rev balance, and it's fine. So it is up and running, and I've shouted out to the world, and we'll be putting on websites and all the rest of it.
Oh man, I wish I had that. I wish I had that bullhorn sound effect.
Yeah, I feel that. So back to the article, and all that we've been talking about just before actually is completely applicable to this article, and I'll explain why. So I've been looking for a house. I've moved out of Cornwall with my wife. We wanted to sort of take a little bit of an easier sort of time. Not that I'm not working, but it's kind of working in a more relaxed environment, which Cornwall is. And we were looking for houses, and this house popped up in the market, a place called Porthcurno, which ironically is where the transatlantic telephone cables come up. It's where they were laid originally. So in a sense, it has a relationship to coordination communication, because without those cables, you wouldn't have an internet and all the rest of it. And this house that I went to see, which was really run down, but in an amazing spot that had the most amazing view of the sea, I get there and it's in dire need of a lot of work. Certainly my DIY skills would never be close. I wouldn't be allowed to do it, that's for sure. And in conversation with the real estate agent, it turned out that this was actually Bertand Russell's holiday home. And he lived there with Nora Russell, who was famous in and of her own right. She was an early feminist at the turn of last century, and fought a case on women's rights where she was being prosecuted. And the two people that paid for the case, which she won, were Bertand Russell and John Maynard Keynes, who was a family friend. And Nora Russell's ashes are scattered at this same house. So I kind of went from there wondering, why is it that I like Bertand Russell, reminding myself, and I found this little clip shot in 1959, the year of my birth, and it's some profound advice. And I think that advice, I'm sure that all of you on the call now will see why this makes even more sense, given the conversation we've just had about cooperating, alternate views, searching for the facts. So I'll leave Darryl to cue it up. Thank you.
One last question. Suppose, Lord Russell, this film were to be looked at by our descendants, like a Dead Sea Scroll in 1,000 years' time. What would you think it's worth telling that generation about the life you've lived and the lessons you've learned from it?
I should like to say two things, one intellectual and one moral. The intellectual thing I should want to say to them is this. When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only, what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out? Never let yourself be diverted either by what you would wish to believe or by what you think could have beneficent social effects if it were believed. But look only and solely at what are the facts. That is the intellectual thing that I should wish to say. The moral thing I should wish to say to them is very simple. I should say, love is wise, hatred is foolish. In this world, which is getting more and more closely interconnected, we have to learn to tolerate each other. We have to learn to put up with the fact that some people say things that we don't like. We can only live together in that way. And if we are to live together and not die together, we must learn a kind of charity and a kind of tolerance, which is absolutely vital to the continuation of human life on this planet.
There you go.
Yeah, one thing that really resonates with me is the idea where at the very end he says that we have to learn a new kind of, these things.
Yeah.
Like we haven't learned it yet. There's this new kind that we haven't quite found yet. And I can relate to that.
Well, I go back to my Bible, James's book on probability, the logic of science. And I guess that's my religion. So, he introduced the idea of zero entropy or maximum entropy, and how we use maximum entropy in solving problems. And that goes back to Socrates. The only true wisdom is the knowledge that we know nothing. at maximum entropy, all probabilities are equal. You make no prejudgments. You're not using priors as Bayesian. And in fact, my company did a DARPA project on on maximum relative entropy, which combined Bayesian logic with maximum entropy. So, you know, for me, it has a deep scientific meaning, as well as the moral side. You know, that we can, we don't. We're not going to like what people say, but we can deal with them on the basis of what we agree on, what we can, you know, rather than judging them for what we disagree on. Let's cooperate with them on the things that we can agree on.
And I think that's kind of what Russell says in the second part.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I just thought that, you know, 1959, he said that.
Yeah.
Prophetic doesn't even do it justice.
Yeah, it's so true, and really, really profound. And it's, I mean, to me, he's describing RChain.
Well, in many respects, I mean, RChain in some senses, because of the process calculus behind it, you know, some of the mathematics that underpin all of that came from Bertand Russel.
Mm.
Before Alan Turing. I mean, he did a lot of the logic work that that was before, well before Alan Turing and von Neumann. Wow. and many of the others, Alonzo Church, because he was born way before, and that's kind of what he's saying. It's bizarre because he got a Nobel Prize, but not for mathematics. He got a Nobel Prize for literature.
Well, he's a great orator, apparently.
Well, you heard it there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for sharing that with us.
Pleasure. I hope people find that interesting. And as you said at the beginning of the call, I hope they find it inspirational.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think people need inspiration. They need perspective. They need the facts. They need lots of things. So if we can pepper that in some small way, maybe there will be a butterfly effect with that. So Jim, we had a great conversation with you last week. You had said that there was more that you wanted to discuss today. So
well, actually, yeah. You know, Darryl said he wanted to interview me, and we didn't cover everything that he was yet. I don't think, Darryl, have you?
That's right.
Well, I mean, the more that whenever I talk with you, it just always opens up more questions. So I don't think it will ever end. Yeah, but I mean, I just, you know, I'm continually blown away as I learn more about your past and what you've done with your life, and your passion towards collective intelligence and the kind of the knowledge and wisdom that you have in your cranium. I just, you know, I want to make sure the world gets it and gets it out there. And I know that you wanted to talk a little bit more about EIES, what it represented back then, and how that could the original stimulation of the ideas that you were working on back then, how that can be reawakened now.
Yeah, well, it's almost perfect timing, but hopefully Art Kleiner will join the call momentarily, who was the editor of the Whole Earth catalog and a user consultant on EIES, who's part of the research, and I guess you can tell more about it. There's Art now. Right on cue.
Awesome.
So Art was part of the EIES research in the early years, and a user consultant on on EIES, and he sort of brought Stuart Brand and others into the fold, and was editor of the whole Earth catalog. Right. Hi, Art.
Hi,
Great
Jim.
to see you, man.
You too.
He's a great guy. I mean, he was, the best guy to work with around.
Well, it's always a great thing to hear when you're just joining a group of people. It actually wasn't me that brought Stuart in. It was Western Behavioral Sciences Institute. And I'm trying to remember who it was.
Well, Stuart kind of said you were like guided him through this new realm of the computer.
Yeah, I did that to some extent. And John Markoff just published a biography of Stuart called The Whole Earth. And I think that episode is mentioned in it. It's it's when you actually look at Stuart's life, it's a long life filled with a lot of really interesting tangents.
So we developed the whole Earth catalog on EIES using groupware, custom commands for doing documents and such.
I still have the, do you remember the fiction story that we did?
Oh, plus story. I mean, EIES had so many participatory commands. Where it learned, even the spelling checker, it learned to spell like a child. Yeah. Okay, if it didn't find something in the dictionary, it asked you how to spell it. If it did, but if it had alternatives, if it had a correct spelling already, it would suggest that.
So it anticipated a lot of the things that people take for granted today.
Yeah, animal game. I'm thinking of an animal. Does it have hair? Yes. Well, gee, I don't know. What is it? Well, we built the animal. We built the community built the database of all animals, and it was antonyms. It knew the antonym of just about every word. It learned it from each other. We would try to challenge the computer to see if it didn't know the antonym of a word, and then we would get to add it. But all these group processes, we don't have anything like that today. Okay, go on. Plus story. It was a wonderful experiment.
Martin Nisenholtz, who then went on to oversee the New York Times's website when it first went public, and I and Stephen Levy, who's writing at Wired, and Elaine Kerr, who was a EIES mainstay, and a few other people. We took a conference and we started telling a story in sequence. And because of the feature that allowed us to take pseudonyms, we were able to take characters and speak as those characters. And to my knowledge, it was the first time that this medium was used as a kind of interactive storytelling way. And I have the printout of it. I don't have an electronic version, but I have the printout, and it's something like 800 pages of printout. So it could be scanned, but I just haven't got the will to scan it or the but it was a remarkable experiment. It lasted for about 7 or 8 months, and then it reached a conclusion. We were all typing in separately, but we all kind of we had what amounted to, the kind of conclusion you'd have in a published story. We all sort of, because we were telling the story together in snippets that combined, and we reached a conclusion, and it ended, and we tried to start it up again, but we didn't really have the appetite for it.
Plus the other one was we had, I don't know if you ever tried it, but did you ever try Plus Adventure?
I think I did once or twice. I was, by the time Whole Earth took off, I was sort of wrapped up, and I had to kind of ease my way out. of EIES. It was
basically, this was a virtual reality in text at that time. You would say, go up, go down, go left, go right.
all right.
And if it didn't know that place, it would say, what do you see? So when the next person came in there, they would see that. It would tell them what they saw. So we could, put things in the rooms, whatever. But, in so many ways, what we're rebuilding today is what we first prototyped on EIES, including, the rank ordering, decision making, the assessments we never used really, but the decision tools and the group processes, all that is we have to build fresh. And then we will have an interactive environment where we can cooperate and build stuff together that we can all share safely. This time securely and safely using RChain.
So would you say that EIES was the first DAO? Could you call it a DAO?
No, it wasn't a DAO. I mean, we developed the decision tools for controlled experiments mostly. And I don't know that any of our groups, operational trials groups, actually used it for decision making. But we had groups, from big companies, IBM, whatever. You would get a work team, okay, and some of them we did face to face, some of them we did online, and we judged the collective intelligence, as whether a group solution was better than the best individual solution, and other factors. It was amazing science that Roxanne Health did, which was 2 by 2 by 2 experiments, where we would break the group in two for one factor. We'd break the group, then we would break them in two again for another factor, and then we would break them in two again for the third factor. So we get we basically test for correlations between a lot of different things.
I wonder if that is the reason why Agile tends to want to pair people.
Well, yeah, some of the I'm not sure, pairing it turned out to, to be the best way to develop a collective intelligence. If you put people together 2 by 2 to solve a problem and then put those groups together, we get a greater collective intelligence. And it's sort of like, they learn their own language, they learn each other's language, they develop a consensus, they combine their knowledge, 2 heads are better than 1, blah, blah. And then when they join with the other pair, they find out where they went wrong and they come up with a consensus.
2 questions, Jim. Was there a size where things started to break down?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was broken. We can say it was broken at 8. Okay, if we put the 8 people, we didn't really try. Wait. Was it 8? I don't remember exactly, but we, we tried, and this was mostly with students, so it may not all be in the final report, which only gave results of the official subjects in business teams, but the Jerry Frumstead was a PhD student running this research, but the groups of 8 didn't come to consensus often, unless they were first in 2s, 4s, and then 8s. If they're when we put the 2 groups of 4 together, they reached consensus and they exhibited the collective intelligence. If we just put the 8 together, we didn't get as much consensus or intelligence.
The other question is, did you have a military engagement? Did the Army, Navy, special ops, any of them play around with the system?
Yeah, not that I know of. Art?
There were some government agencies, but I don't think any of them were military. And there were a lot, it was the limits that led to, so I lost touch probably in the late 80s, early 90s.
Well, you were on the well, right?
I was on the well, but then I was kind of nowhere. I mean, I was at NYPT where I'm still teaching, actually, and now, of course, everything is all blurred together, and it's one large web with various boundaries that are messy. But the issue, to have it started and continued as an academic research center and for the study of social dynamics and how life would work when people were communicating in this asynchronous type text manner. There were very limited graphics, almost none, that you couldn't get on an ASCII keyboard. So it was very much how people communicate when they are communicating through instant messaging. Email was used by a tiny number of people at the time. The ARPA had just introduced email only about 10 years before, and it had taken up very slowly. In fact, it took up during the time, it began to be popular and began to then be indispensable during the early to mid 80s, which is when I was on EIES. So as an academic vehicle for studying in real time the ways in which people would act and interact in the future, it was very powerful. And Murray and Roxanne published their book on it before I ever joined. So they published their book on it in 1978. It was very, very prescient.
The Network Nation.
Network Nation. But that meant that those who used it, it was email. We didn't have email. I was a computer typesetter. I earned my living that way. I knew what computers could do in theory. I never had the idea that a computer could be connected to other people's computers. And there's a demo of me there's a video of me demonstrating EIES at the Whole Earth Catalog offices to a Swedish reporter. And it was, I had to kind of explain what a password was as part of it. And at those days, we were plugging phones into modems with suction cups to hold the phone receiver in place for the 300 baud signal. Having that available was eye-opening and addictive, and people used the word addictive and they wanted to keep it going. So it was simultaneously an academic research base and a communications medium. And the pressure of being that at that time, it could never be a communications medium like the ones that came after. There just wasn't the economics for it. And there wasn't it wasn't in the purpose. It would have been very difficult to commercialize it in that respect. And
Alan Watts says a computer is a communication device, first, second, and third.
Oh, you mean Alan Kay?
Alan Kay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but Alan Watts would.
Never mind.
That's something very different.
I'm getting old.
But I think wasn't Alan Watts on it at one point? In any case, people would drift in and then they drift away and they would be changed, but they wouldn't necessarily stay. 15 years later, what a very few people were doing on EIES would then be commonplace. And it would take that long. And, you know, things like the Well and even CompuServe were way stations. When the browser was introduced, which was 82, 83, one of the first things I remember, and I'll stop talking in a minute, but one of the first things I remember, I was living in Ohio and teaching in New York in the summers. And I'm sorry, 92, 93, the browser was introduced. And so I came back to teach, and I remember walking down Prince Street in Soho on my way to NYU, which is where I was teaching. And I see a billboard with a URL at the bottom of it where you would go, you know, and I realized this little odd medium that we had been, you know, essentially kind of messing around with was now about to become an index to daily life. Everything that happened in daily life would have a version on the internet. And I'm going to say one more thing, which is, if you think about it, the URL is maybe like the fourth or fifth method in human history for indexing human activity. And it's the first one not tied to a hierarchy. So, you know, first we have our name and who our parents are, and we're indexed through our lineage. Then we have our address, all the way down to the landline phone, which indexes us through, you know, sort of where we can be found. Then there's an organizational structure. You know, this is, I am, you know, John the blacksmith. My father was a blacksmith. His father was a blacksmith. We come from the blacksmiths, you know, and we'll always be known as John Smith until that changes. And it doesn't look like it's going to change for another 1,000 years. And then we get the URL, which is I choose my name. I choose my location, and it travels with me if I leave my guild, if I leave my family, if I leave my work, it will travel with me. I guess the university was the, you know, the lineage of who you learned from, and was another one. And it's the first fungible ability to create identity. And that's what, you know, like sort of like kids playing with firecrackers. That's what Jim and Murray and Roxanne and everybody at EIES were doing. Messing around with this incredibly powerful tool, watching each other use it, and coming to a sense, a vague sense that, you know, we'd crossed a turning point.
Wow.
Some nice perspective.
Yeah,
Appreciate
I think
that.
I'd echo that well.
Yeah.
I must say that rarely do I find myself on calls where I am kind of gobsmacked at a whole area of computer science, which I love, and the history of it, the more recent history. Rarely do I get surprised, but you certainly have done that.
Oh, thank you. I wish I had recorded it.
It's been recorded.
It's
Yeah.
been recorded, yeah.
It's going to be up on YouTube if that's okay with you.
That would be fine. Yeah. If you please send me the URL, because I might write something about it. And I've been meaning to write about it. It's the lineage of human identity, and then
I'll be happy. You know, you mentioned RChain, and I'll be happy to give you some RChain Rev crypto tokens.
well, crypto is another whole rage, right?
You're not in it yet.
Faith is in it. My wife's in it. You met Faith, I think. She was on EIES too, I think, if I remember correctly. And so the interesting break, Hermann Kahn, who was also on EIES, once he was addressing a group of people And he said, I want you to know, there are only two events of any importance in human history. And I'm sorry to say, he said, this meeting is not one of them. The first was the agricultural revolution, and the second was the industrial revolution. And what we're talking about, you could see it as a third, but I tend to see it as the outgrowth of the Industrial Revolution. And what the Industrial Revolution represented was the opportunity for human beings to break free, to exercise choice and agency in ways that had never been possible before, because they now had the technological and economic underpinnings to do it.
How does that compare with Alvin Toffler's The Third Wave, where he mentions EIES? He was on EIES.
Yeah, he was on EIES. Well, Toffler was talking in a more narrow way. He was saying there's going to be a cultural shift, and there were stages, there were milestones along the way. But the big one is, who are you responsible to as a person? Before the Industrial Revolution, it was God, or you were, because there was no other way to have agency, or you were an outlier, an extreme outlier, and you had to, there was no other way to deal with the inevitable anxiety that comes from having things, from being, adrift in an existential environment. Whether or not God exists, whether or not, you have religious values, the ability to choose when you can travel anywhere easily, when you can communicate with anyone in the world relatively quickly, unless they're off the grid, and they won't be for long. The ability to change what you do is deeply, deeply jarring and frightening. And yet people crave it. People crave knowing that they can choose what their life will become. They go into massive debt in order to preserve agency, and choice. They, take enormous chances. They do things, they establish two family incomes. And the funny thing is,
they buy Twitter.
They buy Twitter. Well, very few of us buy Twitter, but we have horizons. It used to be that a cat could look at a king, could laugh at a king. Now the cats are, there are ways, on the internet, nobody knows whether you're a cat or a king. And you rise or fall with your ability to put up identity. And you have a lot more agency in that. So you can fake a lot more. And
this is kind of what RChain Publishing's role is with respect to RChain. So RChain is the base technology, without which we can't hope to manage and control our own data. And RChain Publishing is there really to manifest this notion of, really, there are two selves, two ids, if you will. There's your physical id, your actual physical being. And then there is this digital id, in which you're represented primarily by the data that is about you. And what's been lost is the control of your digital id. And what's needed is to give that self-sovereignty, that self-sovereign control back to the individual id, the physical id, give control back to them so that they're in control of their digital identity and all the data that is about them, that they wish to either advertise or keep safely stored.
That's really interesting. I'm just looking at your website.
Yeah, I mean, there's RChain.coop, and then there's r-pub.com, which is owned by RChain the Co-op. So there's.
I want to say a couple words about your background, Steve.
Oh, me? Yes. So my background is. Thought you were going to say it for me then. So my background, computer science degree, way back in the late 70s. So I'm old enough to have written my first programs on punch cards and paper tape.
Mm.
I well remember those days. And very early on in my computing life, when in the first year at university, it turned out I was really good at programming. So I built a multi-user battleships game. And most games up to that point had really been single user. And it's interesting, the whole thing about collaboration wasn't really being dealt with. It was about, oh, well, there's a computer operator sitting at a terminal and I just have to interact with them. Whereas when you do a multi-user game like Battleships, you're interacting with other people, literally. So I didn't really realize the importance of that later. I'd have now, but I didn't at the time. And then, checkered career, startups, all of that stuff. And then I find myself chairing 1/3 of the World Wide Web for Tim Berners-Lee for about 3 years, where the coordination committee that was responsible for all of the WS standards, the web services standards, all reported through the coordination committee, which I chaired. And I also chaired the choreography working group, which was fundamentally about how do we describe collaboration in a peered network. And the person that was most influential in the direction that choreography took was actually Greg, who's on the call, because he came down when all that started. So I had this, about 5 years where I was working cheek by jowl with W3C, albeit from the UK. And my background sort of computationally is distributed systems. And I'm a professor, visiting professor at Kingston University, and do lots of academic stuff with the process calculus community.
Are we going to continue, or are we ending on the half hour?
We've got to end on the half hour because we've got a staff meeting. But this is a very, very good call, and thanks, Jim, for bringing.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, that was awesome. Nora, you want to take us out?
Of course, yeah. And Art, please feel free to join us in a future conversation. Perhaps there's lots more we can discuss.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll continue this next week or in the future. Make sure you're subscribed to RChain on YouTube, and thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.